I am Slick Nick, your personal Sigma mentor. And I love talking about masculine frame. This is so fascinating. There's not a ton of information on YouTube about it. And I've always been in tune to it. I've always been fascinated by it to understand, well, what makes a man specifically other than your actual physical DNA? What does that identity look like when you really unpack it? Aside from the stereotypes, what does it actually look like? So that's what I'm going to unpack. I'm looking at my notes here about what this video is going to be about, and here's what I wrote down. I wrote down, female energy is the default of the world. Not only in humans, but just the whole world. The whole feminine energy is chaos, conflict, and in human beings, emotional turmoil. We will see this in wildlife. You know, things just demolish each other. Even hamsters. I have a hamster. If you put a male and a female together in the same cage, immediately you have babies. But if you keep them in that aquarium or cage, the mother begins eating the babies. I've seen this also with guppies. They will eat the babies because they perceive that there's not enough space and room and access to food and all the things they need. So the mother would start killing and eating the babies. That sounds like chaos and conflict. And if they had souls or minds, then that would be emotional turmoil. That's the default of the world. What's not default is being calm, is providing stability, and providing logical solutions. That's masculine energy. So I'm saying female energy is the default. Men are the exception. Now I strongly believe, and I just filmed a video about this, everybody benefits from masculine energy. Females benefit from masculine energy when they adapt that to their own life. But there's still females at the end of the day who are still looking for men who have even more of that masculine energy. And often, and even for me in my case, I'm married to a woman who ultimately has a stronger personality than I do by default. But she comes home to a guy who is calm. So it's interesting because we can look at power and strength, but we can also look at, yeah, but almost what's stronger than strong? Calm. I think that's fascinating. Okay, so feminine energy is the default. Men, ultimately, part of our identity as a man is to become the exception, is to provide the exception. So I like to use the term designated driver. So I want to tell you this. Just last night, I went to a dinner at work, and I happened to be the only man there. So I was surrounded at a table, all females, for this work dinner. And I was the only one that I think, that I'm aware of, that did not get an alcoholic drink. Doesn't make me better than anybody, but I don't drink alcohol at this point in my life. It's been a long time since I have. And no problem, no big deal. I didn't talk about it. I was very discreet when I ordered it. So it was not common knowledge when I did it. But ultimately, and then someone, when they finally found out at the end of the meal, they're like, oh, well, Nick, you could be the designated driver if we hadn't all driven here separately. And that's the whole concept, is that even outside of a situation where I'm, in theory, the only sober one, do you see how immediately this actual physical situation of being a designated driver translates into being a man in real life? Okay? Take away the alcohol. Let's think of this from a symbolic point of view. You're the man. You're the designated driver. Now, I've made a video, and I think it's doing very well, talking about why drinking alcohol embodies feminine energy, because ultimately it's being controlled versus being in control. So knowing that concept, let's take that a step further. Let's bring in the symbolism as far as what it would be like to live your life as a designated driver, okay? So, well, I am in control. I'm not being controlled. I am calm. I am stable. I'm providing logical solutions. I am distancing myself, or I'm stomping out conflict and chaos and emotional turmoil. You become the designated driver as a man. That's what masculine energy is about. So kind of going back to what I mentioned in my alcohol video, why it's feminine energy. When we look at even in movies and TVs, it's very obvious that it's feminine energy. It's not men that we respect. When we watch The Simpsons on Disney Plus, every episode, Homer goes to the bar at Moe's and he hangs out with his friends, and they're doing nothing. They're just being the seven deadly sins. I mean, we can see gluttony in there, we can see sloth in there. They're not doing anything. That's not masculine. Being active and being involved is the masculine thing. We can look at so many movies that include bar fights. I mean, they even just remade the movie Roadhouse, which I haven't seen the new version. I'll get around to it. But the concept is you get a bunch of men together and they start drinking, and then what happens? They get even dumber and they initiate conflict, and then there's chaos. And by default, there's emotional turmoil because they're angry, which goes back to the seven deadly sins, which would include ultimately wrath or rage, anger. So I'm convinced that alcohol is associated with feminine energy, not masculine energy. But in the real world, even in a setting where there's no alcohol around, you still want to be the, quote, designated driver of the room. You want to be the one leading that energy and providing that energy of being calm and stable, but also being direct. And these are the own masculine traits I've come up with myself, and I've mentioned many times. What are masculine traits aside from masculine energy and staying away from and being the opposite of the seven deadly sins? This is the Nick Shell list of masculine traits. Being direct, being respectful, being emotionally intelligent, being a good communicator, being healthy, fit, and well-dressed, finding your unique skill set and making that part of your identity, having leadership skills, being confident, being funny, and being committed. So if you're carrying around that energy as the designated driver, and again, I'm using it symbolically at this point, but if you are walking around with that energy and having those traits, you're more masculine as a man. And guess what? You're more attractive. Because so many people, younger men, believe the wrong thing by default. They believe that what makes them attractive is how tall they are, how much hair they have, and how much money they make. And that is more of the low-hanging fruit of what actually makes anyone attractive. When it's all said and done, what's the most attractive is to have these traits that I talked about. Because all those other things I just mentioned, the money and the hair and the height, it's all artificial. And ultimately, that's not attractive to females beyond the initial glance. Because the very next thing a female's gonna wanna do is get to actually know you and see what you're about. Your identity, which is your energy, which is everything I just covered in this video. So there you go. Do you identify as the designated driver? And I absolutely believe that having no alcohol serves as a perfect template to get you on the right path to be that designated driver, even when alcohol is not involved. And let me be clear, I'm not literally talking about being a designated driver. I'm talking about symbolically as you live your life. You want to be the person in the room who seems to be in control, but not forcing that control. You just are the control. Your comments belong right here.